Everything we are experiencing right now comes from what we are emitting. The reality we live is the exact reflection of what is happening inside us, in our feelings, thoughts, and the frequencies we sustain every day. Most people believe that reality is a sequence of external events that happen to them. They act, wait, react, and over time they assume that life situations reflect what the world has to offer. But this perception, although logical at first glance, is based on a fundamental inversion. It places the external as the cause and the internal as the consequence. But what if it's exactly the opposite? What if the feelings, the inner states, the emotional and mental patterns we sustain every day are actually the invisible molds that shape what we see out there? This perspective is part of a deeper understanding of how the quantum field interacts with human consciousness. The quantum field is not an external force that delivers rewards to those who wish hard enough. It is a vibrational mirror, a matrix of possibilities that responds precisely to what we already carry within us. We don't live through a situation and only then feel something about it. In truth, many times, it is the pre-existing feeling that drives the experience. The feeling isn't generated because something happened. Something happens because, even without realizing it, we were already vibrating in a state close to that feeling, or to the lack of it. This reversal between cause and effect is one of the main turning points in the conscious awakening process, because it forces us to leave the position of someone who waits for something to change and step into the role of someone who influences change, not through effort, but through internal coherence. The quantum field doesn't interpret what you want. It responds to what you are, to what you vibrate now. It doesn't pick up your desire on a mental level, but rather the frequency you sustain emotionally and energetically in the present moment. It might sound simple, but this understanding changes everything. Because when you understand that reality isn't coming to you, but is simply reflecting you, you begin to look inward with more attention. You begin to notice that what manifests is not what you think most intensely, but what you feel most consistently. Reality in this context is just a reflection, like a vibrational echo. And the quantum field operates like a mirror, an invisible but extremely precise mirror. And that's exactly why every real change begins inside, and only afterward does it become visible on the outside. But if what we live is only a reflection of what happens within us, then the inevitable question is, what exactly is reflecting this? The name we give to this mirroring system is the quantum field. But this expression, although common in many spiritual and scientific circles, is still often misunderstood. Many see it as an external, mysterious force that operates like a cosmic provider, as if it were a mechanism capable of rewarding well-defined wishes with positive experiences. But the quantum field doesn't give anything. It only reflects. The field has no personality, no judgment, no preference. It doesn't choose who deserves more or less, and even less responds to requests made with words. The field is an energetic, intelligent, and sensitive matrix that shapes itself in response to the information it receives. And that information doesn't come from what you say. It comes from the frequency you sustain. Everything in the universe vibrates, and every vibration carries information. When you think, feel, or act, you are emitting vibrational data. And this data, no matter how subtle, is read and returned by this field that functions like a mirror. It doesn't interpret the content of your life. It simply replicates the energetic pattern you generate internally. And what defines that pattern is not just an isolated thought or a passing emotion. It's the coherence between what we think, feel, and how we act. When these three elements come into alignment, the emission becomes clear, consistent, and easily recognized by the field. This is the reason why so many people repeat the same types of experiences throughout life, even after changing location, job, or relationships. They don't realize that although the external scenario changed, they continue emitting exactly the same internal signal. And since the field doesn't choose or analyze, it simply responds faithfully to what it receives. The quantum field doesn't distinguish between what we want and what we fear. To it, there's no positive or negative. There is only vibrational coherence. If we vibrate lack with intensity and consistency, that's the information that gets recorded and reflected. If we vibrate presence, trust, and wholeness, the field returns experiences compatible with those states. And this process occurs in real time, continuously and uninterrupted. There is no need for effort, ritual, or persuasion. The external reality is constantly updated to reflect the internal energetic content. That's why every attempt to force reality without changing your frequency becomes exhausting and unproductive. And this is exactly where many people get lost, trying to mold the outside with their hands, without realizing that the only real lever is the frequency we live with inside. But to understand how this vibrational process translates into physical reality, it's necessary to take a closer look at the signals the field decodes and the way it responds to each one. Most of what a person emits to the quantum field is not generated consciously, quite the opposite. The majority of the vibrational signals that sustain someone's reality are emitted automatically from emotional memories, mental patterns, and internal states that repeat day after day without the person even noticing. And this is the point where many disconnect from the true origin of their experiences. It's common to believe that vibration is controlled only by the thoughts we choose to have, or the words we decide to say. But true vibration is determined by the combination of thought, emotion, and biology. So, if your body is used to feeling stress, anxiety, frustration, or insecurity, it begins to reproduce those states even in the absence of concrete stimuli. This creates a cycle where the internal chemistry generates a vibrational frequency that, in turn, keeps attracting situations similar to the ones you want to avoid. It's as if you're sending out an energetic message without being aware of its content. And the quantum field, which only mirrors, keeps reflecting exactly what you're transmitting. This disconnect between what is consciously desired and what is vibrationally emitted is the foundation of many blocks in manifesting the desired reality. The person mentally affirms what they want to achieve, but their emotional state is stuck in patterns of lack, fear, or dissatisfaction. And since the field responds to the dominant frequency, reality remains the same. This repetition pattern happens because the body and mind have developed a vibrational conditioning. Unprocessed emotions from the past become chronic states. And when an emotion becomes constant, it stops feeling like a problem and starts being perceived as a personality trait. That's when vibration crystallizes and becomes the foundation of everything the field continues to reflect. This is what many refer to as vibrational unconsciousness, a state in which the person believes they are seeking something new, when in reality, they're just renewing the old. They change their goals, reshape objectives, seek new experiences, but never alter the energetic signature the field keeps mirroring. And that's why no real change occurs until the vibrational pattern is exposed, understood, and transformed. Because as long as the emitter remains the same, the field's mirror will continue to reflect the same image. But what exactly can interrupt this cycle and reorganize vibration in a way that matches what we truly want to experience? Transformation only becomes possible when there is awareness of the vibrational cycle that's in motion. But understanding what sustains that cycle is only the first step. As we saw earlier, what truly changes reality is the ability to consciously interfere with the signal being emitted. And this is exactly where the law of reversibility becomes one of the most powerful keys to conscious creation. This law, although rarely discussed, is based on a simple yet revolutionary principle. If an experience can generate an inner state, then an inner state can also generate an experience. In other words, if an external event can make you feel joy, confidence, or safety, then you can also activate those same feelings before anything even happens. And by doing so, begin to attract experiences aligned with that new inner state. This completely reverses the traditional logic of cause and effect, because instead of depending on the environment to shift your frequency, you start generating the frequency that shifts the environment. This is the essence of vibrational creation. You don't wait to feel after seeing the result. You feel first, because you understand that feeling is the real trigger of manifestation. This reversal is so powerful precisely because it gives energetic responsibility back to the individual. And at the same time, it dismantles the illusion that the external world is the starting point for change. The practical application of this lies in recognizing that your emotional state no longer has to be a consequence. It can be a conscious choice. And when you decide, deliberately, to enter a state of gratitude, love, wholeness, or clarity, even without an external reason, your body begins to register that state as real. The biochemistry shifts, the nervous system responds, the mind starts reprogramming its own patterns, and the quantum field, as always, simply mirrors. And it is at this moment that reality begins to reorganize as the result of a new frequency. You may have experienced something like this without realizing it. Have you noticed how unexpected situations seem to arise when you're in a state of appreciation or clarity? These are natural reflections of reversibility in action, because when your internal state changes, the field responds as a direct consequence of the new vibrational information that was sent out. The field responds to the dominant frequency, and the dominant frequency only changes when the new vibration becomes familiar enough to replace the previous pattern. And this is the point where emotion stops being a reflection of reality and becomes the foundation of it. If your emotional state can reconfigure reality, that means there's a kind of hidden language between you and the quantum field, a silent, yet constant communication that's always happening, even if you're not aware of it. This language is neither verbal nor symbolic. It's electromagnetic. Science already understands that thoughts produce an electrical charge in the brain, while emotions generate a magnetic charge in the heart and body. When thought and emotion combine, these two forces form an electromagnetic signal that is emitted from the body. And it's this signal the quantum field reads. If you think about abundance but feel insecure, the signal emitted is confusing, fragmented, and the field responds with instability. On the other hand, when there is alignment between mental intention and emotional state, the field receives a clear, precise, and magnetic message. Thought works like the direction of the message. It organizes the what you want to experience. But it's feeling that gives power to that message. It's the emotion that adds vibrational density to the signal, making it strong enough to interact with the field. That's why thinking positively isn't enough. Isolated thoughts have little power when they're not supported by a coherent body and a matching emotion. And in the same way, emotions without direction can create vibrational turbulence, intense emotional states, but disconnected from a clear intention, produce chaotic, incoherent, or unpredictable results. The field, therefore, decodes the energetic signature of your state of being, not just fragments of what you feel or think occasionally. It responds to the dominant frequency, the one most present in your emotional routine and most repeated throughout your days. And that includes both conscious states and the automatic patterns of the unconscious. This vibrational signature is formed from several layers: habitual thoughts, dominant emotions, bodily patterns, beliefs, internal language, and even your level of presence in daily life. All of this sends out signals. All of it makes up your frequency. That's why many external changes only become possible when there's a real and stable change in the quality of internal information. Because what changes reality is the consolidated vibration behind the desire. And the more you understand this silent language, the more aware you become of what you're emitting. And with that, the more control you have over what you're creating, even if you don't notice it right away. But understanding this internal dynamic still doesn't solve one of the biggest obstacles in the manifestation process: the unconscious tendency to condition feeling to results instead of anticipating it as the source. Even understanding that the quantum field responds to what is emitted, many people still maintain a deeply rooted habit, waiting for reality to change first before feeling what they want to feel. This is one of the most common, and also one of the most subtle, mistakes. The mind, conditioned by linear time and survival logic, tends to think in terms of cause and effect. First, something happens, then I react. First I receive, then I feel. But when it comes to interacting with the quantum field, this order is reversed. And those who don't break this mental pattern end up trapped in a cycle that perpetuates the same reality. When we condition our internal state to an external event, we're basically affirming that we can't change on our own. We're handing over to the world the role of reorganizing our vibration. And with that, even if unconsciously we keep the previous signal running, the same one that created the reality we want to change. The result is a kind of emotional waiting. We want to feel fulfilled, but we'll only feel that way after seeing the concrete result. We want to live in freedom, but we'll only open up to that after seeing the circumstances change. And in the meantime, the field keeps reflecting exactly what it's receiving: a vibrational state of lack, expectation, and dissatisfaction. This type of emission is incoherent. Not because the desire is wrong, but because the emotional condition is reversed. The person wants a new reality but vibrates like someone still trapped in the old one. And since the field doesn't judge or compensate, it simply replicates what's being sustained now. This is the point where many give up on the process, thinking nothing is happening. But the quantum field doesn't respond to impatience. It responds to frequency stability. When the desired emotion becomes familiar inside the body, before any external evidence, the signal changes. And when the signal changes, reality begins to reorganize around that new signature. That's why waiting to feel is what blocks the process. Feeling first with consistency and presence is what opens space for manifestation. This is a paradigm shift, moving from the logic of waiting to the logic of vibrational creation. But for this to be possible, it's necessary to let go of an old part of yourself, the part that got used to living in reaction instead of living in emission. And this process begins with a fundamental step: recognizing and dissolving the old self that sustains the previous vibration. The reason why many people can't maintain a new frequency is that they are still emotionally identified with what we call the old self. This old self is not a clear or defined identity, but rather a set of emotional habits, mental patterns, repeated beliefs, and unresolved memories. It's made up of everything that has been absorbed throughout life: experiences, traumas, lessons, interpretations, and now operates as an automatic base to react, feel, and think. Even when someone consciously desires a new reality, this old system still runs in the background, keeping the vibration aligned with the past. And since the quantum field mirrors the dominant frequency, what hasn't been transformed continues to be reflected, even if it has already been mentally rejected. That's why no deep vibrational shift happens without gradually breaking away from that automatic structure. And that break doesn't happen through effort or repression, but through conscious observation. It's necessary to see with clarity which patterns are still being repeated, not to judge them, but to disidentify from them. When we start to observe our thoughts without automatically getting involved with them, or notice our emotions without merging with them, a space opens up. This space is the beginning of vibrational freedom. It's at this point that we stop being just someone who reacts and start becoming someone who chooses what they are supporting internally. This transition requires presence, because the old self is always ready to take control, especially in moments of uncertainty, stress, or emotional repetition. It shows up as familiar reactions, old internal narratives, and behaviors that feel like you, but are actually just conditioned repetition. And as long as these reactions aren't brought into the light of consciousness, they'll continue to emit vibrational signals that the field recognizes as valid. Even if your intention is different, the mirror responds to what is active, not to what is desired. Creating a new vibrational state, therefore, is not just about adopting new thoughts. It's about embodying a new emotional identity with new internal references, new automatic responses, and a new way of being in the world. And that only happens when you stop feeding, through thought and feeling, what used to sustain the previous version of yourself. This process can be uncomfortable because the body is used to a certain set of sensations. It feels safe in what is familiar, even if that familiar is dysfunctional. That's why, when you begin distancing yourself from the old self, it's common to feel resistance, unexplained anxiety, emotional impulses, unconscious attempts to return to the old pattern. But this resistance is part of the reorganization process. It's a sign that change is underway. And the more you can remain as the observer of the old pattern, without reinforcing it with attention or identification, the more space opens for a new frequency to stabilize. And when this new frequency starts becoming familiar, the body recognizes it as natural, the mind begins to validate it, and the quantum field inevitably responds with matching experiences. Within the logic of the quantum field, it's not possible to access a different reality while sustaining the same old emotional system. And this is not a matter of belief, but of energetic compatibility. Emotion acts as a filter that determines which possibilities we can perceive, interpret, and respond to. Basically, elevated emotions expand perception, while reactive emotions restrict it. Certain emotional states function as a more refined frequency. They broaden access to subtle information, opportunities, and signs that are already available, but usually go unnoticed by those who are emotionally contracted. That's why emotional alignment is not about attracting something. It grants access to realities that already exist as potential, but are at higher levels of vibrational organization. It's the same principle as an antenna. The more stable and precise the frequency, the better the quality of transmission. Emotions like clarity, serenity, and contentment place the system in a state of openness, not just emotionally, but neurologically and biologically as well. They reduce the interference between intention and manifestation. This is a crucial point because many people try to access new realities while still attached to old emotions. And even if the intention is clear, emotion acts like an access lock, not because the universe is punishing them, but because of vibrational logic. If the body is used to tension, it can't sustain expansion without creating internal conflict. And only when this kind of internal stability begins to take root can mental intention truly gain strength and direction within the field. Intention by itself is fragile. Intention needs to be supported by an available body and a matching emotion. When the mind projects a direction but the body remains stuck in opposing emotional imprints, the information sent to the field becomes incoherent, and the field, which responds to the whole, not just the thought, returns an unstable reality, or simply the same as before. That's why intention without coherence becomes just noise, and coherence without conscious intention may result in automatic repetition. It's in the union of both that transformation begins to take form. Tuning into the field with coherence means choosing an internal direction and stabilizing the emotional body in that direction. It's not an exercise in imagination. It's a process of vibrational training. The body needs to be trained to experience what the mind understands as possible. This means that instead of thinking of something as distant or hypothetical, you begin to generate the state that would be natural if that were already real. Not as fantasy, but as an internal rehearsal. This practice, repeated consistently, begins to reprogram the system as a whole. The brain records the images as real memories. The nervous system adjusts its responses. The body starts to recognize that state as familiar. And over time, this experience stops being just an idea and becomes a vibrational signature. At that point, what you emit no longer depends on mental effort. The intention becomes frequency. And it's this frequency, already stabilized, that starts to organize the external experiences around you. This is where the process starts to reverse. You're no longer trying to create something outside. You're simply living in coherence with what the field can now reflect back. Because now, there is a real correspondence between what you desire and what you already sustain. But this kind of alignment isn't maintained only during moments of practice. It also needs to be sustained in daily life, in actions, words, and reactions. And it's in this continuity, in how you live between practices, that the field finds the real signal to mirror. The way you live between moments of practice is just as important as the practice itself. The vibrational state you sustain in your day-to-day life is what truly shapes the signature the field recognizes. That's why presence, not just intention, becomes one of the most relevant pillars of conscious creation. It's easy to cultivate an elevated state for a few minutes of meditation. What's difficult is maintaining that state while answering emails, dealing with the unexpected, or handling tough conversations. But regardless of the moment, the field is still listening. It doesn't pause its response just because we're busy. It simply continues to reflect the predominant frequency of our state of being. That's why manifestation doesn't depend only on peaks of clarity, but on the vibrational quality with which you conduct even the smallest parts of your life. How do you wake up in the morning? With what energy do you carry out ordinary tasks? What emotional pattern dominates your silences, your pauses, your most automatic conversations? It's in these details that routine reveals true vibrational coherence. It doesn't matter what you visualize for 5 minutes if, in the other 23 hours of the day, you're repeating emotional reactions from the past. The field will always respond to the pattern. But being present doesn't mean eliminating all thoughts or controlling every emotion. It means noticing when you leave the state you want to maintain and doing what you can to return without guilt, but with awareness. Presence brings clarity, and clarity helps you choose more precisely what you will continue to emit. Additionally, the way you structure your routine has a direct impact on the frequency you sustain. Small daily practices, like being silent for a few minutes, observing your body, breathing with intention, or interrupting an emotional pattern before it spreads, function as adjustment points. They are micro-corrections that, together, build a field of vibrational stability. Cultivating a conscious routine doesn't mean being rigid. It means creating intentional spaces to reconnect with the state of being you want the field to recognize as your new base. And this requires consistency, but it also requires gentleness. Because true alignment doesn't come from control. It comes from becoming familiar with what you've already chosen to be. And when that familiarity grows, the effort decreases. Automatic reactions lose strength, and the body starts to act according to the new vibration without needing to be reminded all the time. The effort that was once used to force external change can now be redirected to maintaining internal stability. What requires practice is sustaining emotional coherence, staying focused without anxiety, acting without rushing, and trusting without needing an immediate result. In the old model, we act because we need something to change so we can feel better. In the new model, we're already in an aligned internal state, and the actions are just natural expressions of that frequency. There is no longer an attempt to conquer what's far away, but a willingness to live what is already coherent with who we've become. This change is subtle but profound, because it dismantles the belief that you need to do a lot to manifest. And it begins to reveal that what really moves reality is not the amount of action, it's the quality of the vibration with which you live. Of course, movement is still necessary, but it's no longer reactive or compulsive. It becomes guided by intuition, by synchronicity, by clarity. It's as if the pieces start to fit together on their own, without the interference of someone trying to force the assembly order. When that state becomes familiar, the field no longer needs constant corrections. It already recognizes the pattern, and reality starts to behave like a natural extension of your internal state, without the rigidity of control, without the weight of expectation. But this can only be sustained when there is an authentic emotional bond with the vision you've chosen to live, not as something that needs to happen to complete you, but as something you already feel at home with. Everything said so far points in one direction. You reflect what you already sustain. The field can only reflect something new when you become that new, fully, not in isolated moments, not just in intention, but in internal structure, thought, emotion, posture, perception, presence. This requires responsibility, because when you accept that reality is a mirror of your vibration, you stop being a victim of circumstances. But it also requires spiritual maturity to understand that this change doesn't happen by wish, but by consistency. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.